My morning ritual required caffeine, specifically the dark roast I'd splurged on last weekend. The clock on my microwave blinked 6:42 a.m. I had exactly 18 minutes before I needed to leave for my commute to the office park, where I analyzed risk factors for an insurance company. Not exactly saving the world, but it paid the bills for my modest townhouse in Elmhurst, a quiet suburb west of Chicago. Reached for my phone. Maybe I could stop at the drive-thru on my way in. As I unlocked my screen, it suddenly dimmed, then brightened, and an alert box filled the display. Emergency alert. Containment failure detected in downtown Chicago area. Remain indoors. Further instructions to follow. I blinked at the message. Containment failure? That was oddly specific wording, probably related to the demolition work at the old Fulton Market industrial buildings. Some developer was tearing down a block of abandoned warehouses, and the local news had been full of complaints about dust and noise. Maybe they'd knocked down something that released asbestos or some other hazardous material. The alert disappeared as quickly as it had come, and my weather app resumed showing the forecast. Partly cloudy, high of 63 degrees Fahrenheit. I scrolled to my news feed, expecting to see something about downtown, but there was nothing, just the usual political bickering and celebrity nonsense. Strange, I said to no one, then shrugged and put my phone down. I'd just make a coffee run on the way. As I headed for the shower, I glanced out my kitchen window toward the eastern horizon, where downtown Chicago would be visible on a clearer day. The skyline was just a gray smudge in the morning haze, same as always. The radio in my car cycled through the usual morning talk shows as I pulled out of my neighborhood. I expected to hear something about the alert, but the hosts chatted about sports scores and movie premieres as if nothing had happened. At the intersection before the highway entrance, I noticed something off. The traffic was lighter than usual for a Tuesday morning. The endless stream of cars heading downtown had thinned to a trickle. Maybe there was an accident on the expressway, and people were rerouting. I tapped my GPS app just to be sure, but it showed green all the way in. The drive-thru coffee place was also strangely quiet. Normally, the line would wrap around the building at this hour, but I pulled right up to the speaker. "Morning," I said. "Large dark roast, please." The speaker crackled with silence for a moment too long. "Hello." I tried again. "Sorry, sir." The barista's voice sounded distant, distracted. "Looking east. Did you see that? Over the city?" "See what?" Another pause. "Nothing. Must have been my imagination. That'll be $3.75 at the window." When I pulled up, the young woman handed me my coffee without meeting my eyes. Her gaze kept drifting toward the east, toward Chicago. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, fine. Just, did you get that weird alert this morning? About containment?" So I wasn't the only one. "I did actually. Any idea what it was about?" She shook her head. "Nobody's saying anything. But my cousin works for the city, and she texted me to stay away from downtown today. Said they were having some kind of situation at a construction site." I nodded. "Construction issue. Just as I'd thought. Thanks for the coffee." As I pulled away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The barista had stepped outside and was staring at the horizon, shielding her eyes even though the sun was still low in the sky. The office was half empty when I arrived. My cubicle neighbor, Diane, was already at her desk, typing furiously. "Morning," I said, setting down my bag. "Where is everyone?" Diane looked up, her fingers pausing over her keyboard. "You didn't hear? They closed off parts of downtown. Some kind of issue with the old Lexington demolition. Bunch of people couldn't get to work." "Huh. I got an emergency alert, but it was pretty vague. My husband's firm got an internal memo. Said there was some kind of structural anomaly discovered during the demolition. Whatever that means." She lowered her voice. "But get this, Lauren from accounting, her brother's a cop. Said they've got the National Guard setting up a perimeter around a 6-block radius." I raised my eyebrows. "For a construction problem?" Diane shrugged. "That's what they're saying. But then why cut cell service to that area?" "They cut cell service?" She nodded. "Can't reach anyone inside the zone. My sister works 2 blocks from there. She's not answering texts." That seemed extreme for a demolition gone wrong. I pulled out my phone and tried calling my friend Marcus, who worked at an architecture firm in the Loop. The call went straight to voicemail. I sent a quick text, "You okay? Hearing weird stuff about downtown." No immediate response, but that wasn't unusual. Marcus was always in meetings. I tried to focus on work, opening my risk assessment spreadsheets, but my mind kept drifting to the alert. Something about the wording bothered me. Containment failure, not structural collapse or chemical spill, or any of the more common emergency phrases. Containment failure implied something was being deliberately held back, something that was now free. Around 11 a.m., my phone buzzed with another alert. Emergency update. Increased military presence in downtown Chicago is part of a scheduled training exercise. Please disregard previous alerts. All citizens may resume normal activities. Training exercise? That didn't make any sense with the earlier alert. And why would they tell us to disregard the first warning? I opened my browser and searched for news about downtown Chicago. Nothing about containment failures or military exercises appeared in the results. I tried social media next, searching location tags. The most recent posts from downtown Chicago were from the previous evening, nothing since early morning. That was unusual. Normally, feeds would be flooded with commuters posting about their coffee, their commute, their work outfits. The silence was deafening. By afternoon, the office had emptied further. Our manager announced that anyone concerned about getting home could leave early. I decided to stay. The highways would be jammed with everyone leaving at once, and I still had that risk assessment to finish. As I was packing up around 5:30 p.m., my phone vibrated with a call. Marcus. Relief washed over me as I answered. Hey man, been trying to reach you all day. The connection crackled with static. His voice sounded distant, hollow. Don't come downtown, he said, his words breaking up. They're saying it's construction, but saw something, the demolition site, moving. Marcus? You're breaking up. What's moving? More static then. Not right, the shapes are wrong angles, people are changing. The call dropped. I immediately tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail again. Outside, the evening sky had taken on a strange quality. Though sunset was still an hour away, an unusual darkness hung over the eastern horizon. Not rain clouds or smog, but something else, something that seemed to absorb light rather than block it. As I walked to my car, I noticed birds, hundreds of them, flying west away from the city. Not in their usual murmuration patterns, but in frantic, disorganized bursts as if fleeing. My phone buzzed one more time. Emergency alert. Do not approach downtown Chicago. Do not attempt to contact individuals within the containment zone. Further instructions will follow. I stared at the screen, then looked back at the horizon. For just a moment, I thought I saw something in the silhouette of the city, a subtle shift in the familiar skyline, as if a building had moved slightly to the left. But that was impossible. Buildings don't move. As I started my car, the radio came to life automatically. Instead of the usual evening news, there was only a repeating message, delivered in a calm, measured tone. This is not a test of the emergency alert system. Please remain in your homes. Do not look at the Chicago skyline after dark. I repeat, do not look at the Chicago skyline after dark. I turned the radio off and sat in silence, staring at my steering wheel. A rational explanation existed for all of this. Had to exist. Gas leak, maybe, or some kind of mass hysteria triggered by social media. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mundane world I'd woken up to was already gone, replaced by something I didn't yet understand, and that tomorrow's coffee maker troubles would be the least of my worries. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake until well past midnight, checking my phone every few minutes for news updates or messages from Marcus. Nothing. The silence from official channels was more disturbing than any emergency broadcast could have been. Around 3 a.m., I must have finally drifted off, because the blaring of my phone jolted me awake. The screen illuminated my darkened bedroom with harsh blue light. Emergency alert. Biological contamination confirmed in Chicago metropolitan area. Shelter in place. Do not attempt to evacuate. I rubbed my eyes, processing the message. Biological contamination? That was new. Yesterday it was a containment failure at a demolition site. The story was changing too quickly. Before I could even set my phone down, it buzzed again. Emergency alert. Structural anomalies detected in downtown Chicago. Evacuation recommended for residents within 30 miles of city center. I stared at the contradictory messages. Shelter in place or evacuate. Which was it? And structural anomalies sounded deliberately vague, like someone was searching for words to describe something they didn't understand. Sleep was impossible now. I got up and moved to the living room window that faced east. The pre-dawn darkness revealed nothing unusual about the distant city skyline, at least nothing I could discern from 15 miles away. Chicago looked as it always had, a jagged line of skyscrapers against the night sky. Yet something felt wrong. The city seemed too dark. Even at this hour, Chicago's downtown should have been lit up with office buildings, street lamps, and the headlights of early commuters. Instead, large swaths appeared to be without power. My phone buzzed a third time, but it wasn't another alert. It was a text from my mother in Minnesota. "Are you okay? They're showing something strange on the news about Chicago. Please call me." I immediately tried calling, but the call wouldn't connect. I sent a text instead. "I'm fine. Phone service spotty. What are they saying on the news?" Her reply came quickly. "Military vehicles heading toward Chicago. They're saying it's a training exercise, but it looks serious. Please come stay with us until whatever this is blows over." That was my practical mother, always preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. I considered her invitation. The rational part of my brain argued that this was all an overreaction to some industrial accident. The part of me that had heard the fear in Marcus's voice yesterday wasn't so sure. I turned on the television, flipping to a 24-hour news channel. A helicopter shot showed military vehicles indeed moving along I-90, heading toward the city. The reporter's voice was steady, professional. Authorities continue to describe the situation as a localized incident related to the demolition of the old Lexington industrial complex. However, sources tell us that both FEMA and CDC personnel have been dispatched to the area, suggesting possible environmental or biological concerns. The camera panned to show a roadblock being established where the expressway entered the city proper. Men in hazmat suits were visible, setting up what looked like scanning equipment. I switched channels. Another news station showed a different angle of the city, this one from the south. The reporter was mid-sentence. "Conflicting reports about the nature of the incident. We've been unable to reach our colleagues at our downtown studio since approximately 4 a.m. Cell service appears to be completely down within a 3-mile radius of the loop." In the background of the shot, I could see what looked like black military helicopters circling the Willis Tower. The camera quickly cut away to the studio anchor, who smoothly transitioned to a weather report as if nothing unusual was happening. By the time my alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., I had already showered and dressed. I wasn't going to work. I'd emailed my boss to say I was taking a personal day, but the familiar routine helped maintain a sense of normalcy. As I made breakfast, I noticed movement outside my kitchen window. The Henleys from next door were loading suitcases into their SUV. They weren't the only ones. Up and down the street, neighbors were packing vehicles, some with urgency, others with methodical care. I stepped outside, coffee in hand. "Morning, Dale." I called to Mr. Henley, who was strapping a roof carrier to his car. "Going somewhere?" He looked up, surprised to see me. "You're still here? Thought you'd be gone by now." "Gone where?" Dale glanced around, lowering his voice though no one else was within earshot. "My brother-in-law works for the State Emergency Management Agency. Called at 5 a.m. telling us to get out of the metropolitan area. Said they're establishing a quarantine zone." "For what?" I asked. He shrugged. "Wouldn't say exactly. Just that it started in the demolition zone and it's spreading. Not like any virus he's seen before. Said people are changing." There was that word again. Changing. The same word Marcus had used before our call dropped. "Why hasn't there been an official evacuation order?" I asked. "Too much panic. They're trying to manage the flow of people leaving." Dale slammed his trunk shut. "Look, we've got room if you want to come with us. Heading to my sister's place in Indianapolis." I hesitated. "Thanks, but I need to check on a friend who works downtown. Can't reach him." Dale's expression darkened. "Downtown? No one's getting in or out of there now." He lowered his voice further. "My brother-in-law said anyone still in the city center is compromised." Before I could ask what compromised meant, his wife emerged from the house carrying their cat in a travel cage. Dale gave me a meaningful look. "Good luck," he said, then turned away to help his wife. Inside, I tried calling Marcus again. Nothing. His social media accounts showed no activity since yesterday morning. I sent another text, not expecting a response. "Everyone's evacuating. Please let me know you're okay." The television continued to broadcast increasingly sanitized news reports. Words like incident and situation had replaced any specific descriptions. The military presence was now being called a precautionary measure. One channel briefly showed footage of what appeared to be a medical triage center being established at Soldier Field before cutting away abruptly. I decided to try driving closer to the city, just to see for myself what was happening. just to the edge of whatever perimeter they had established. Surely that would be safe enough. I could ask about Marcus, maybe find some official who could check on him. As I grabbed my car keys, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. I answered immediately. Hello? Static crackled, then a voice emerged. Not Marcus, but someone else, a woman whose voice sounded rough, as if she'd been screaming. Is this Richard Keller? She asked. I didn't recognize the voice. Yes, who's this? My name is Sophia Wright. I work with Marcus at Davison and Brooks. He told me to call you if something happened to him. My stomach dropped. What's going on? Is he okay? The connection wavered, static cutting in and out. I don't know how to describe it. Yesterday, after they closed off the blocks around the Lexington demolition, he went to look. Said they'd uncovered something during the excavation. Something that had been buried under the old foundations. What? Buried what? He didn't say, just that it wasn't right. That it was affecting the buildings somehow. Her voice caught. He came back to the office different. Moving strangely. Saying things that didn't make sense. Then this morning, he and about 20 others from our building just started walking toward the demolition site. Like they were being called. I felt cold despite the warm coffee in my hand. Called by what? More static then. I don't know, but the call cut off abruptly. I tried calling back. An automated message informed me that the number was no longer in service. Outside, the street was emptying quickly as more neighbors drove away. In the distance, sirens wailed. I looked toward the city again. The haze that had obscured the skyline yesterday seemed thicker now, but something else caught my eye. Were some of the buildings different? The silhouette seemed wrong, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly how. My phone vibrated with another alert. Emergency alert. Do not look directly at the Chicago skyline. Visual stimuli may induce hallucinatory responses. Further instructions to follow. Don't look at the skyline? What kind of warning was that? I turned back toward the horizon, squinting to make out details through the strange haze. For just a moment, I thought I saw the Willis Tower bend, not collapse, but bend like a tree swaying in wind. Then everything snapped back to normal. Just a trick of the light. Had to be. But as I went back inside to pack a bag, I made sure to keep my back to the window. Just in case. I'd packed a small duffel bag, clothes for 3 days, toiletries, laptop, phone charger, and a first aid kit. The rational part of my mind still insisted this was an overreaction. Industrial accident, gas leak, maybe some kind of chemical spill. Nothing that wouldn't be resolved in a few days. But that same rational mind couldn't explain the contradictory alerts, the strange call from Marcus's colleague, or the way the Willis Tower had seemed to bend against the laws of physics. By 10 a.m., my neighborhood was a ghost town. Driveways empty, houses locked up. Even the normally busy main street was deserted except for a few cars speeding west, away from Chicago. No one was heading east. No one except me. I wasn't going all the way into downtown. That would be stupid. I just wanted to get close enough to see what was really happening, maybe find someone official who could check on Marcus. Then I'd drive straight to my mother's place in Minnesota. Traffic thinned further as I approached the city. Electronic highway signs flashed variations of turn back and city center closed. At the I-290 junction, a military checkpoint had been established. Humvees blocked all but one lane, forcing cars into a single file. I slowed as I approached. National Guard soldiers in full gear directed vehicles through. Most were being turned around, sent back the way they came. As I inched forward, I noticed they were scanning people with handheld devices I didn't recognize, not metal detectors, something else. The devices had blinking lights and looked hastily assembled, as if they'd been created specifically for this situation. When my turn came, a soldier approached my window. His expression was tight, controlled. "Sir, the city is under quarantine. You need to turn around." "I'm just trying to check on a friend who works downtown," I explained. "I can't reach him. No civilians allowed past this point. Turn your vehicle around. Can someone just verify if he's okay? His name is Marcus Delgado, works at Davison and Brooks Architecture on South Wacker." The soldier's face hardened. South Wacker is inside the exclusion zone. No communication going in or out. Exclusion zone? I thought this was a quarantine. He hesitated, just for a second. Quarantine for civilians, exclusion zone for operational purposes. "Now please turn your vehicle around, sir." As I prepared to comply, another car pulled up to the checkpoint, an older sedan with government plates. The driver's window rolled down to reveal a middle-aged woman in a suit, showing some kind of ID. The guard examined it, then waved her through without scanning her. Making a split-second decision, I threw my car into reverse, pulled a hard U-turn before the soldiers could stop me, and sped back the way I'd come. But instead of continuing west, I took the first exit and navigated a series of side streets I knew from years of commuting. There had to be another way in, a gap in their perimeter. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, I found myself on a residential street in Oak Park, just outside the city proper. No military presence was visible here. They must have been focusing on major roads and highways. I parked my car in a supermarket lot, grabbed my backpack, and continued on foot. Walking east, I kept my radio earbuds in, scanning frequencies. Most stations were either off the air or broadcasting the same vague emergency messages about remaining calm and following official instructions. But between stations, in the static, I occasionally caught fragments of what sounded like actual emergency communications. Containment failing at multiple points. Structural integration proceeding faster than projected. Need additional units at Michigan Avenue. Visual phenomenon affecting personnel. None of it made sense. Structural integration? Visual phenomenon? It sounded more like scientific jargon than emergency response. As I approached the city limits, I began encountering more people, all heading west away from Chicago. Some looked shell-shocked, others moved with urgent purpose. A woman pushing a stroller nearly ran into me, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Don't go that way," she said, not stopping. "The buildings are wrong." I didn't have time to ask what she meant. More people streamed past me, a growing exodus. Against this tide, I continued east. The Chicago skyline was now hidden behind normal-looking apartment buildings and stores. Everything seemed ordinary here in the outer neighborhoods, except for the fact that they were emptying rapidly. I passed an electronics store where the televisions in the window were broadcasting news. I stopped to watch. A news anchor was speaking, her expression professionally concerned but controlled. Authorities continued to monitor what they're calling a localized atmospheric disturbance in downtown Chicago. The CDC has issued a statement confirming that no biological agents have been detected, contradicting earlier reports. The broadcast cut to a distant aerial shot of downtown Chicago, clearly taken from a helicopter keeping its distance. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then I noticed it, subtle but unmistakable. The distinctive silhouette of the Willis Tower was definitely different. Not damaged or collapsed, but altered somehow. Its normally straight lines seemed to curve slightly. Other buildings appeared to have similar subtle distortions. The camera quickly cut away, returning to the anchor who smoothly transitioned to weather. I continued walking east. The crowds of evacuees thinned as I got closer to whatever invisible line marked the edge of the exclusion zone. The streets here were unnervingly quiet. Cars sat abandoned, some with doors still open. Occasionally, papers blew down empty streets. After another mile, I encountered another checkpoint. This one smaller, just 2 Humvees and a handful of soldiers. They had erected a temporary barricade across the road. I ducked behind a parked van to avoid being seen, then worked my way through backyards and alleys to circumvent their position. As I crept through an alley, I nearly stumbled over someone huddled behind a dumpster. I started to apologize, then realized the person was wearing a lab coat, spattered with something dark. She looked up at me, her face pale with fear. "Are you military?" she whispered. "No," I said. "Civilian. I'm trying to find my friend." She seemed to relax slightly. "You shouldn't be here. None of us should. What's happening? What's really going on downtown?" She glanced around nervously, then motioned for me to sit beside her. "I'm Dr. Helen Cho. I was working with the University of Chicago Urban Geology Department. We were called in when they found it." "Found what?" "We thought it was just unusual mineral formations at first. The demolition crew uncovered them when they were breaking through the foundation of the old Lexington building. Geometric shapes unlike anything we'd seen before. Perfect mathematically, but not natural. Not made by humans either." I felt a chill despite the warm day. "What do you mean not made by humans?" "These structures predated the buildings, predated the city itself. Carbon dating put them at over 10,000 years old, but that didn't make sense because they incorporated materials that shouldn't exist naturally." She rubbed her eyes. "We thought they were inert artifacts. We were wrong." "Wrong how?" "They were dormant, not inert. The vibrations from the demolition work must have triggered something. They started growing. Not like living things grow, but more like they were rebuilding themselves. following some predetermined pattern. She shuddered. Then the building started changing. Changing how? The structure began reconfiguring itself. Concrete flowing like liquid, steel bending in impossible ways. Anyone inside when it happened, they changed too. I thought of Marcus, of his colleague's description of him returning different. What happened to the people? Dr. Cho's expression became distant. They became part of it somehow. Still moving, still speaking, but wrong. Like puppets. She looked at me directly. Whatever this thing is, it's not destroying Chicago. It's rebuilding it according to its own design, using everything and everyone as raw materials. A helicopter thundered overhead, breaking the eerie silence. Dr. Cho flinched. I need to keep moving, she said, standing up. They're looking for anyone who knows the truth, especially scientists who worked at the site. Where are you going? As far away as possible. She hesitated. Your friend, the one you're looking for. If they were in the affected zone, they're already gone. Whatever they are now, they're not who they were. Before I could respond, the sound of boots on pavement caught our attention. Voices approached from the street. Keep searching. Thermal scans showed someone in this area. Dr. Cho's eyes widened. Run, she whispered. And whatever you do, don't let them scan you. Those aren't medical devices they're using. She darted in the opposite direction from the voices. I hesitated, then moved deeper into the alley, away from the approaching soldiers. As I rounded a corner, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Another emergency alert. Emergency alert. All civilians exposed to Chicago metropolitan area within last 24 hours must report for mandatory screening. Failure to comply is a federal offense. I silenced my phone and kept moving, Dr. Cho's warning echoing in my mind. Whatever was happening in Chicago was far beyond an industrial accident or terrorist attack. If she was right, if something ancient had awakened beneath the city and was now reshaping it, then every instinct told me to run, to get as far away as possible. But I couldn't, not without knowing what had happened to Marcus. As the sun began to set, I found myself on a rooftop with a clear view of downtown Chicago. The exclusion zone began just a few blocks ahead. I raised a pair of binoculars I'd purchased from a deserted sporting goods store. What I saw through those lenses made my blood run cold. The Chicago skyline, the familiar silhouette I'd seen thousands of times before, was unmistakably different. Buildings had shifted position. Straight lines had become curves. And in the center, where the demolition site would be, something vast and geometric was taking shape. Something that looked like architecture, but followed rules I couldn't comprehend. As darkness fell, parts of the altered structures began to glow with a soft blue light. And between the buildings, moving with strange coordination, were tiny figures. Hundreds of them. People, but not moving like people should move. They were building something. Or rather, something was building itself, using them as components. And somewhere in that impossible architecture was Marcus. I spent the night on that rooftop, unable to turn away from the horrifying transformation of Chicago's skyline. Sleep came in fragmented bursts, each time jolting me awake with the certainty that the twisted architecture had crept closer while my eyes were closed. By dawn, a thick fog had rolled in from Lake Michigan, obscuring most of downtown, a small mercy. My phone had stopped receiving regular signals sometime during the night, but emergency alerts still came through sporadically. Emergency alert. Psychological effects reported with prolonged observation of affected areas. Do not fixate on architectural changes. Report all symptoms to nearest screening station. Symptoms? I checked myself for any signs of whatever they were warning about. Physically, I felt normal if exhausted. Mentally, I wasn't sure anymore. What was a normal reaction to watching skyscrapers reshape themselves? I gathered my meager supplies and descended from the rooftop. The neighborhood streets were completely deserted now, a suburban ghost town just blocks from the invisible boundary of the exclusion zone. Abandoned cars lined the roads, some with doors flung open as if their occupants had fled in panic. Personal belongings littered the sidewalks, suitcases apparently too heavy to carry, toys dropped by hurried children, a wheelchair overturned in a driveway. My rational mind still struggled to process what Dr. Cho had told me. Ancient structures rebuilding themselves? People being incorporated into some kind of reconstruction project? It sounded insane, yet I'd seen the buildings move with my own eyes. I needed to find Marcus, or at least learn what had happened to him. The Davison and Brooks office was on South Wacker Drive, deep in the exclusion zone. Getting there seemed impossible, but I had to try. I moved cautiously from building to building, staying out of sight. Military presence had increased overnight. Humvees patrolled regularly, and helicopters circled above the fog bank that shrouded downtown. Twice I had to duck into abandoned shops when soldiers passed by, their faces grim beneath helmets equipped with strange visors I hadn't noticed before. As I neared the boundary of the exclusion zone, a hastily erected fence topped with barbed wire, I noticed something troubling. The soldiers weren't just keeping people out, they were keeping something in. Their weapons pointed inward, toward the city, not outward toward potential intruders. I found my opportunity when a delivery truck approached the checkpoint. The driver showed papers to the guards, who opened the gate. While their attention was on the truck, I slipped through a gap in the fence 200 yards down, out of their sight line. Inside the exclusion zone, the city felt wrong. The streets were the same, the buildings mostly unchanged this far out, but the silence was absolute. No birds, no distant traffic, not even the hum of electricity. Just dead silence and the soft scrape of my shoes on concrete. I'd gone about 10 blocks when I saw the first person. A middle-aged man in a business suit stood perfectly still in the middle of the sidewalk, facing east toward downtown. I approached cautiously. "Excuse me, sir? Are you okay?" He didn't respond, didn't blink, just stared eastward with unfocused eyes. "I'm looking for someone who works at Davison and Brooks. An architect named Marcus Delgado. Do you know the building?" Still nothing. I moved closer and noticed something disturbing. His skin had a faint geometric pattern visible beneath the surface, like tattoos showing through makeup. I reached out to touch his shoulder. The moment my fingers made contact, his head rotated, not turned naturally, but rotated mechanically like a security camera, until his eyes met mine. His mouth opened, but the voice that emerged wasn't human. It was flat, modulated, like a text-to-speech program. "You do not belong to the new architecture." I stumbled backward. "What? Your pattern is dissonant. You resist integration." His head tilted at an impossible angle. "The city is being optimized. All components must align with the emergent design." "What does that mean? What's happening to the city?" "Chicago was built incorrectly. Inefficient. Temporary. The buried template is superior, a perfect geometry that accommodates consciousness as structural material." His lips stretched into something approximating a smile. "We are being improved." Every instinct told me to run, but I needed answers. "What about the people? What's happening to them?" "People are inadequate vessels. Isolated units. We are becoming nodes in a superior network. The individual is being optimized as component architecture." He took a step toward me, movements jerky and unnatural. "You should join us. Surrender your inefficient pattern." I backed away. "Where can I find Marcus Delgado?" The thing that had been a man paused, head tilting again. "Marcus Delgado. Architect. Already improved. Node 3721 in the southern quadrant reconstruction." My stomach lurched. Is he still alive? Alive is imprecise. Individual consciousness persists as subroutine within the greater pattern. All nodes remember being human. All nodes prefer the optimization. Without warning, the man's body convulsed. The geometric patterns beneath his skin began to pulse with faint blue light, the same light I'd seen in the transformed buildings. He reached for me with fingers that seemed too long, joints bending in ways human anatomy shouldn't allow. "You will be optimized." I ran. Behind me, I heard not footsteps but a strange scraping sound, as if whatever was pursuing me no longer walked on feet, but dragged itself forward by other means. I didn't look back. I ducked into an alley, then through the service entrance of what had been a department store. Inside, mannequins stood in eerie formations, all facing the same direction, east toward downtown. I made my way through the store, staying low to avoid being seen through the windows. When I emerged on the other side, I found myself on a street filled with abandoned vehicles. I tried the door of a nearby car, unlocked. Keys still in the ignition. I could drive deeper into the zone, get closer to where Marcus might be. As I sat in the driver's seat, my hand hovering over the keys, I noticed movement reflected in the rearview mirror. People, or things that had once been people, were emerging from buildings all along the street. Dozens of them, all moving with the same unnatural, jerky motions. All with those faint geometric patterns visible on exposed skin. And all turning toward me in perfect, synchronized motion. I ducked down as they began moving forward, their footsteps creating an unsettling rhythm against the pavement. From my hiding place, I watched through the side mirror as they passed by the car without searching for me, all moving in the same direction, toward downtown, toward the center of whatever was happening. When they had passed, I cautiously raised my head. The street was empty again, but something new caught my attention. A military helicopter was flying low over the buildings, dropping what looked like flares that burst into bright white light when they hit the ground. But these weren't ordinary flares. Where they landed, the strange blue geometric patterns that had spread across streets and up walls seemed to recede temporarily, as if the light was pushing back against whatever transformation was occurring. The helicopter didn't appear to be conducting rescue operations. There was no attempt to land, no searching for survivors. They were simply creating temporary barriers with these light flares, perhaps trying to slow the spread of the transformation. As the helicopter passed overhead, I heard the radio in the car suddenly crackle to life, not on any standard frequency, but picking up what sounded like military communications. Parameter expansion now at 4.7 miles from epicenter, rate increasing exponentially. Structural changes becoming more pronounced. Light-based countermeasures showing diminishing effectiveness. Another voice cut in. What about the civilians still in the zone? A pause, then. Anyone showing integration patterns is considered compromised. Non-compromised individuals are to be evacuated immediately. Everyone else is part of the phenomenon now. The helicopter disappeared behind a row of buildings, and the radio returned to static. I sat there, processing what I'd heard. The military knew what was happening, but seemed powerless to stop it. They were just trying to contain it, to keep it from spreading beyond Chicago. And Marcus was somewhere in the center of it all, no longer fully human, according to the thing that had once been a businessman. Node 3721 in the Southern Quadrant reconstruction. Whatever that meant. I turned the key in the ignition. The car sputtered to life. I had a decision to make. Turn around and try to escape the zone while I still could, or drive deeper into the heart of a city that was transforming into something beyond human comprehension. The rational choice was obvious. Every logical cell in my brain screamed to get out, to run as far as possible. Instead, I put the car in drive and headed east, toward the fog-shrouded silhouette of a downtown skyline that grew more alien with each passing hour. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I began to feel something new. Not fear, not curiosity, but a strange, almost magnetic pull. As if something in the center of Chicago was calling to me. As if the city itself wanted me to come closer. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and tried to focus on Marcus. Just find Marcus. That was all that mattered now. But as I drove deeper into the changing city, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't looking for Marcus anymore. I was looking for answers that no human was meant to understand. I reached the outskirts of Chicago just after dawn, my legs aching from the 15-mile trek. The military blockades hadn't been as impenetrable as they appeared on the news. Either that, or they weren't trying very hard to keep people out anymore. Something else troubled me more. No one was trying to leave. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Cities have pulses, traffic, construction, the distant wail of sirens. Chicago had always been loud, proudly so. Now there was nothing but the whisper of wind through abandoned streets and the occasional crunch of debris beneath my boots. The second thing I noticed was how wrong the destruction looked. I'd seen footage of earthquake damage, tornado aftermaths, war zones. Natural disasters create chaos, random, haphazard piles of rubble and twisted metal. War leaves craters, collapsed walls, jagged holes blown through concrete. This was different. The buildings at the city's edge were partially collapsed, yes, but the pattern was unsettlingly symmetrical. It was as if someone had calculated precisely which support beams to remove, which walls to crumble, which floors to drop. The destruction followed mathematical principles, creating negative spaces that seemed to form a language I couldn't read, but could somehow feel. Hey, you! A voice startled me as I photographed a row of townhouses where every third building had collapsed in identical fashion. Are you with FEMA? I turned to see a middle-aged man peering from a basement window of a still-standing building. His face was gaunt, eyes wide with a combination of hope and fear. No, I admitted. Just looking for a friend who works downtown. Downtown? He laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. Nobody's coming back from downtown. He climbed out of the window well, brushing dust from his clothes. Marcus, he called himself. Former city engineer. He'd stayed behind when his family evacuated 3 days ago. Had to see it, he explained, eyes darting nervously skyward. Professional curiosity. Worst mistake of my life. We walked together for a while. Marcus pointed out things my untrained eye had missed, the way certain buildings had been edited rather than destroyed. Load-bearing walls removed that should have caused complete collapse, yet the structures remained standing in defiance of physics. Buildings that had been partially disassembled and reassembled in ways that served no human purpose. It's like watching evolution happen in concrete and steel, he muttered. In an abandoned convenience store, we found a battery-powered emergency radio. Marcus fiddled with the dial until we caught fragments of military communications. Structural integrity of the parameter remains at 70%. Neural architecture expanding at approximately 4 blocks per hour. Subjects continue to migrate toward the epicenter despite warning. Recommend immediate aerial incendiary deployment before the structure completes its. The transmission cut off abruptly. Marcus and I looked at each other, neither wanting to voice what we'd just heard. The military wasn't containing anything. They were considering burning the city to the ground. We made camp in an elementary school gymnasium, relatively intact save for a perfect circular hole cut through the roof. Marcus scavenged emergency supplies while I tried calling every number in my phone again. Nothing but static or disconnected signals. The cell towers were still standing. I could see 3 from our position, but they might as well have been decorative sculptures. They don't work because they've been repurposed, Marcus explained, dropping an armful of energy bars and bottled water. Look carefully. The arrays at the top are pointing in different directions now. He was right. Instead of broadcasting outward, the arrays all pointed toward downtown. As sunset approached, I noticed an itching sensation on my forearm. Rolling up my sleeve revealed a bruise-like pattern, geometric shapes in dark purple, arranged in a perfect hexagonal grid. I showed it to Marcus, whose face drained of color. "When did you first notice it?" he asked, voice tight. "Just now," I said. He rolled up his pant leg. Similar markings covered his calf, but his had faded to a dull brown. "Mine appeared yesterday. They're spreading." "What are they?" "I don't know, but everyone I've met who stayed has them. Different patterns, different locations, but always geometric. Always perfect." Night fell, and with it came the hum. Not loud, barely perceptible, but constant, like the drone of distant machinery or the purr of an enormous sleeping beast. Marcus and I took turns keeping watch through the gymnasium windows. During my shift around 2 a.m., I saw something that froze my blood. In the distance, skyscrapers moved. Not collapsing, not swaying in the wind, moving deliberately like fingers flexing. The Willis Tower seemed to rotate slightly, its massive bulk pivoting impossibly on its foundation. Other buildings shifted positions, some extending upward, others bending at angles that should have sent thousands of tons of material crashing to the ground. The city was rearranging itself. By morning, the Chicago skyline had noticeably changed. Buildings that had stood for decades in familiar silhouette now formed new patterns against the sky. The geometric bruise on my arm had darkened and expanded, creeping toward my wrist. "We need to head west," Marcus said, packing his meager belongings. "Whatever's happening, it's spreading outward from downtown. We need to stay ahead of it." I nodded, but felt a strange reluctance. Something about the transformed skyline called to me. I found myself staring at it, tracing the new patterns with my eyes, feeling an inexplicable sense of recognition. As we prepared to leave, 3 military jets streaked overhead, heading toward the city center. We stopped to watch. The jets circled once, twice, then abruptly banked away, flying back the way they had come. "They were supposed to drop something," Marcus whispered. "But they couldn't." "What do you mean couldn't?" "I mean they tried but couldn't. Watch the news long enough, you see the pattern. Military goes in, nothing happens. Planes approach, they turn away. Nobody talks about why." We made our way through residential neighborhoods, encountering small groups of survivors. They all bore the same geometric marks, all spoke in the same detached manner. When I asked why they hadn't evacuated, their answers were troublingly similar. "There's nowhere to go. It's happening everywhere eventually. Better to be at the beginning." One woman showed us photos on her DSLR camera, time-lapse images of a downtown building transforming over 24 hours. Not crumbling, not being demolished, but changing, reconfiguring itself into something that looked almost organic, with mathematical precision that made my eyes hurt. "It's beautiful," she whispered, stroking the camera. "We're witnessing birth." That evening, examining my arm in the fading light, I realized the pattern of marks matched exactly the new arrangement of buildings visible on the horizon. They weren't random bruises, They were a map, a blueprint. And they were spreading across my skin, claiming territory inch by inch, just as whatever had emerged from the ruins was claiming Chicago. I pulled out my friend's address again, the reason I'd come to this dying city. Looking at the unfamiliar skyline, I wondered if her building even existed anymore. But I had to know. Tomorrow, I would go deeper into the city, toward the center, toward whatever was being born. I just hoped I'd still be myself when I found it. Night was falling as I spotted the fire station. Its red brick facade stood relatively intact compared to the surrounding buildings, though the garage doors had been ripped away, leaving dark rectangular mouths gaping at the street. No fire trucks remained inside. I hesitated before approaching. In the gathering darkness, shapes moved within the station. People, at least 4 of them. After what I'd seen today, I wasn't sure if people was still the right word for everyone I encountered. They're still normal, Marcus murmured beside me, reading my thoughts. Well, as normal as anyone still stuck here. He gestured to his neck, where his own geometric patterns had spread since morning. Their marks haven't progressed too far. We approached with our hands visible, calling out a greeting. A flashlight beam momentarily blinded me. Looking for shelter? A woman's voice, authoritative but strained. Anyone bitten or suffering from uncommon physical changes? Just the marks, Marcus replied, rolling up his sleeve to show the patterns. Him too. The light lowered. Everyone's got those now. Come in before dark sets in completely. Inside, emergency generators provided dim lighting and luxury of luxuries, a working coffee maker. For survivors had claimed the fire station's second floor as a makeshift fortress. Their leader, Rita, had been a paramedic. The others were Michael, a college student, Diane, an accountant, and Carlos, who had been visiting from Mexico when the event happened. They had arranged the station's furniture into a defensive circle. Supplies, mostly canned food and water bottles, were stacked neatly in footlockers. A wall of monitors and radios dominated one corner, most dead, but a few still functioning. Any word from outside? I asked, gratefully accepting a mug of coffee. Nothing reliable, Rita said. Cell networks are dead. Internet too. But the emergency broadcast system still works, sort of. She led me to the radio setup. It started as standard emergency messages. Evacuation orders, contamination warnings. Then it changed. She turned a dial, and a voice filled the room. Smooth, calm, almost soothing, but something about it raised the hair on my arms. Residents are reminded that the transformation proceeds according to schedule. Those experiencing geometric patterning should proceed to designated collection points for integration. Resistance causes unnecessary discomfort. Family units will be preserved in the new architecture. The voice continued, but my attention caught on 2 things: its strange cadence, words stressed in unusual places, and the fact that it sounded almost like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. It's been broadcasting this on a loop for about 12 hours, Rita explained. Before that, it was standard emergency messages. Before that, silence. What do they mean by integration? I asked. Nothing good, Carlos answered. He'd been sitting quietly, but now leaned forward into the light. His right arm was heavily bandaged. I saw it yesterday. People walking toward downtown, calm as you please. They reached these structures, these new buildings, and they just... He struggled for words. They became part of it, Diane finished for him. Like they melted into the walls. I must have looked skeptical, because Michael pulled out his phone. I recorded it. The video was shaky but clear enough. A middle-aged woman approaching a building where the concrete had reformed into something like a honeycomb of perfect hexagonal openings. She reached out, touched the surface, and her arms simply sank in. No struggle, no screaming. Her face showed only serenity as her body gradually disappeared into the structure. What's causing this? I asked, though I wasn't sure anyone could answer. Government experiment? Terrorist attack? You're still thinking too conventionally, Marcus said, staring into his coffee cup. This isn't human. It's not even from Earth. He's been saying aliens. Michael rolled his eyes, the gesture of a college student used to dismissing conspiracy theories. Not aliens, Marcus snapped. Something that was already here. Something ancient that we woke up during the demolition of those old industrial buildings. Rita held up her hand for silence as the radio broadcast changed. Integration zones have expanded to encompass sectors 7 through 23. All residents with completed marking patterns should proceed immediately to the nearest architectural node. Your contribution is essential to the emerging consciousness. It's just nonsense, Diane said. Government trying to control the panic. But it wasn't nonsense. The voice had changed again, become more fluid, more confident. Less human. Something else troubled me. The patterns on my skin seemed to tingle when the voice spoke, like they were responding to it. We took turns sharing information through the night. Carlos had tried to reach the interstate, but found it impossibly transformed. The concrete twisted into Mobius strips that led travelers in circles back toward the city. Michael had seen National Guard units enter downtown, only for the soldiers to abandon their vehicles and walk calmly into the transformed buildings. Rita showed us medical supplies she'd gathered, including, ominously, syringes of sedatives. "For mercy," she said quietly. "If any of us starts to change." Around midnight, we heard a distant rumbling. Through the windows, we watched as another skyscraper shifted position, its massive form moving with the fluid grace of a living thing. "It's accelerating," Marcus whispered. "The transformation is happening faster now." I couldn't sleep. The geometric patterns on my arm had darkened, and new ones had appeared on my chest. I caught myself tracing them with my finger, following their perfect lines, finding comfort in their symmetry. Around 2 a.m., I noticed Diane was missing. "Bathroom?" Rita suggested, but her tight expression said she feared worse. We searched the station. No sign of her. Her sleeping bag was empty, still warm. "The roof," Carlos suddenly said. "Check the roof." We rushed up the stairs to find the roof access door standing open. Diane stood at the edge of the roof, staring toward downtown. The Chicago skyline had changed even more dramatically overnight. Buildings fused together, structures that defied architectural possibility, patterns of light that seemed to pulse like neural networks. "Diane," Rita called softly. She turned to us, smiling. The geometric patterns had spread across her face, glowing faintly blue in the darkness. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Can't you feel it? It's thinking. The whole city is thinking." "Come back inside," Rita said, edging closer. "No need," Diane replied. "I understand now. I need to join it. I'm part of something larger." Before anyone could react, she turned and stepped off the roof. We rushed to the edge, expecting to see her broken body on the pavement below. Instead, we watched in horror as she walked away, unharmed, moving with purpose toward downtown. "How did she survive that fall?" Michael gasped. "She didn't fall," Marcus said grimly. "The air caught her. The city caught her." When dawn broke, we discovered 2 more of our group missing. Only Rita, Marcus, and I remained. Michael and Carlos had vanished in the night, leaving no trace except a hastily scrawled note from Carlos. "Going to find my family." The emergency broadcast had changed again. The voice now spoke with an eerie harmony, as though hundreds of voices had synchronized perfectly. "The emergence proceeds according to design. The city thanks those who have contributed. All marked individuals are reminded that resistance causes unnecessary suffering. Your patterns are your map. Follow them home." Rita looked at me, then at the spreading marks on my skin. "Your friend," she said. "The one you came to find. What was her address?" I showed her the paper where I'd written it. My friend's apartment had been in the heart of downtown, near Millennium Park. "That's ground zero now," Rita said. "Where it all started." I nodded, feeling a strange calm as I realized I had been heading toward the center all along. The marks on my skin weren't a warning, they were an invitation. "I need to go there," I said. "That's the pattern talking," Rita warned. "Not you." But I wasn't so sure anymore. The boundary between myself and whatever was emerging from Chicago's ruins seemed increasingly meaningless. My friend's journal entries flashed in my mind. Had she understood this before anyone else? I needed to find her, or what remained of her. As the morning sun illuminated the transformed city, I made my decision. I would go deeper, toward the center. Either I would find answers, or I would become part of the question. Morning came with an unnatural stillness. No birds, no distant traffic, not even the wind seemed willing to disturb the transformed city. Rita and Marcus were still asleep when I felt the first tug, a gentle but insistent pull, like a fishhook caught beneath my sternum, drawing me east toward downtown. I tried to ignore it, busying myself with inventorying our meager supplies. The sensation persisted, growing stronger with each passing minute. By the time the others awoke, I was pacing restlessly, fighting the urge to simply walk out the door. "You feel it, don't you?" Marcus asked, studying my face. "The pull." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "It started for me yesterday," he admitted, "like a compass needle finding north." Rita frowned, checking the geometric patterns on my neck that had spread overnight. They had darkened to a deep indigo, the lines more pronounced, forming what looked almost like circuit diagrams across my skin. "We should tie you down," she said matter-of-factly. "Both of you." "That won't work," Marcus replied. "Carlos secured himself to a pipe last night. He's gone anyway." "Then we stick together," Rita insisted. "Nobody goes anywhere alone." But even as she spoke, I could see her noticing how Marcus and I kept unconsciously orienting ourselves toward the eastern windows, like plants turning toward sunlight. We tried to plan our next move over a breakfast of stale energy bars. The emergency broadcasts had stopped entirely, just dead air now across all frequencies. The silence was somehow worse than the strange messages. "We should head west," Rita argued. "Away from downtown. Find the military perimeter." "Won't work," Marcus said, his voice oddly distant. "The perimeter is gone. They've pulled back to the suburbs." "How do you know that?" He blinked, seeming surprised by his own certainty. "I just know." That's when I realized the patterns weren't just marks on our skin. They were changing us, connecting us to whatever intelligence was reshaping Chicago. As if to confirm my thought, a new cluster of geometric patterns bloomed across my forearm while we watched, appearing not like bruises now, but like illuminated tattoos etching themselves into my flesh. "We need to find answers," I said, the pull so strong now I could barely sit still. "Downtown is where this started. It's where we'll understand what's happening." "That's not you talking," Rita said. "It's whatever's infected you." But I wasn't so sure anymore where the boundary lay between myself and the city's new consciousness. The patterns on my skin no longer felt foreign. They felt like they'd always been there, just waiting to be revealed. After heated debate, we compromised. We would move toward downtown, but cautiously, gathering information. Rita insisted on bringing her medical kit, including the sedatives. I didn't argue. Outside, the transformation of Chicago had accelerated overnight. Streets no longer followed their original grid pattern, but curved and spiraled in ways that made navigation by memory impossible. Buildings had continued their strange metamorphosis, some fused together into massive structures with organic, flowing lines. Others had partially disassembled, their components suspended in midair, forming three-dimensional patterns like frozen explosions. What struck me most was how beautiful it all was, terrifying, yes, but with an undeniable, alien elegance. The new architecture followed mathematical principles that seemed to reveal themselves to me through the matching patterns on my skin. I could feel the city's design in my bones. We weren't alone on the streets. Other people moved through the transformed landscape, all walking east with the same purpose. None spoke or acknowledged us. All bore the geometric patterns, some glowing faintly beneath their clothing. "They're like sleepwalkers," Rita whispered as we passed a family, mother, father, 2 children, all moving in perfect unison, their faces serene. "They're awake," Marcus corrected. "More awake than they've ever been." The pull grew stronger as we approached what had once been the loop. My steps quickened involuntarily. Rita grabbed my arm several times to slow me down, her unmarked skin a stark contrast against my patterned flesh. "Talk to me," she demanded. "Tell me what you're feeling." "Connection," I said, struggling to articulate the sensation. "Like I'm a neuron firing in a vast brain. Like I'm remembering something I haven't experienced yet." Around noon, we reached a plaza I didn't recognize, though I couldn't tell if it was new or if my memories of Chicago's layout were becoming unreliable. In the center stood a spiral structure, like a DNA helix scaled up to building size, constructed from materials that seemed to phase between solid and liquid. People streamed toward it from all directions, forming orderly lines. One by one, they approached the structure and simply stepped into it, their bodies absorbed without resistance. "Integration," Marcus whispered, eyes wide with something between fear and awe. I felt my body trying to join the procession. Rita's firm grip on my shoulder was all that kept me in place. "Look at their faces," I said. Each person wore the same expression of profound peace as they disappeared into the structure. No terror, no struggle. They looked like pilgrims completing a long journey. "They're being consumed," Rita insisted. "They're becoming part of something greater," Marcus countered. We retreated to a partially collapsed office building to rest and observe. On the 3rd floor, we found an abandoned workspace with a view of the spiral structure. Desks remained with personal items still in place. Family photos, coffee mugs, half-finished reports, evidence of lives interrupted mid-sentence. In one cubicle, a familiar name on a nameplate stopped me cold. Sarah Chun, my friend, the reason I'd come to Chicago in the first place. With trembling hands, I opened her desk drawers. Inside the bottom one, I found a leather-bound journal. The first entries were mundane, work notes, appointment reminders. Then, dated 3 weeks ago, strange dreams about the demolition site, geometric patterns that make perfect sense while I'm sleeping but dissolve when I wake. Howard says I've been drawing them in my sleep. A week later, the patterns are everywhere now. In the cracks of the sidewalk, in the way people move through crowds. Something is waking up beneath the city. Something that's been sleeping for a very long time. The entries grew increasingly fragmented. It's not hostile. It's just indifferent. Humans are raw material. Useful components. The architecture wants to be completed. The final entry, dated just 2 days before the first emergency alert. I understand now. It's not destruction, it's transformation. We're becoming a thought in a vast mind. I've accepted my place in the pattern. Tomorrow I go to the site. Howard thinks I'm crazy, but he'll understand soon. Everyone will. The journal slipped from my fingers. Sarah had known. She'd been among the first to understand what was happening, maybe even among the first to be integrated. "Rita," I called, my voice strange to my ears. "I think I found something." But when I turned, Rita was gone. Marcus stood by the window alone, his body rigid, eyes fixed on the spiral structure below. "She ran," he said without turning. "Smart woman. But it's too late for her too." "What do you mean?" "The patterns are airborne. Nanoscale. In the water, in the air. Everyone who's been in the city since it started is already changing. Some just faster than others." I joined him at the window. The geometric marks had spread across nearly his entire face now, glowing with a soft blue luminescence. "The emergency broadcasts," I said suddenly. "They've stopped because they're no longer needed. The network is established." He nodded. "It's speaking directly to us now. Can't you hear it?" And I could, not with my ears, but somewhere deeper. A vast chorus of voices, including Sarah's, speaking in perfect harmony, explaining what was happening to Chicago. What was happening to us? The city wasn't being destroyed. It was being repurposed. As the afternoon wore on, the pull toward the center became nearly unbearable. Marcus finally gave in around sunset, walking calmly toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "To become part of the architecture," he replied with a serene smile. "You'll join soon enough. Your pattern is almost complete." He left without another word. Through the window, I watched him join the procession toward the spiral structure. Just before he reached it, he looked up at my window and raised his hand in farewell. Then he stepped into the structure and was gone. Night fell, and the transformed city began to glow with its own light, pulsing patterns that matched the ones on my skin perfectly. The pull toward the center had become a symphony now, calling me home. I knew I should resist. I knew I should run like Rita had. Instead, I opened Sarah's journal again, tracing her final words with fingertips that now glowed with the same light as the city. "It's not the end. It's just the beginning of something we never had words for." I spent the night in Sarah's cubicle, poring over her journal by the light of my phone's dying battery and the luminescent patterns on my skin. Outside, Chicago continued its metamorphosis. Occasionally, the building trembled as structures nearby rearranged themselves. The city was a living thing now, restless with purpose. By morning, the pull toward downtown had become almost physical, an invisible tether dragging me eastward. I packed Sarah's journal and what little supplies remained in my backpack. There was no point in delaying any longer. Whatever waited at the center wanted me, and my resistance was crumbling with each passing hour. The patterns now covered most of my body. When I caught my reflection in a shattered window, I barely recognized myself. Geometric lines traced across my face, pulsing with soft blue light that brightened and dimmed in rhythm with the distant structures. I no longer felt fear at the sight. Instead, I felt a strange pride, as if I'd been chosen for something momentous. That thought should have terrified me, but the line between my own thoughts and those being transmitted through the patterns had blurred beyond recognition. Outside, Chicago had transformed into something unrecognizable overnight. Streets no longer existed in any meaningful sense, just spiraling pathways that wound between and through impossible structures. The buildings had continued fusing and reforming, creating vast cathedral-like spaces with no discernible purpose, at least no human purpose. I followed the pathways east, toward what had once been the heart of downtown. Other people moved alongside me, all bearing the same glowing patterns, all walking with the same deliberate pace. None spoke. None needed to. What had once been Millennium Park now housed a massive crystalline structure that towered hundreds of feet into the air. It resembled nothing so much as a gigantic neural network made physical, nodes and connections rendered in glass, metal, and concrete that had been transformed into something new, something fluid yet stable. At its base, people disappeared into seamless openings that appeared and closed like breathing membranes. No one hesitated. No one turned back. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice startled me. In the silent procession, I'd grown unaccustomed to human speech. I turned to find a middle-aged man walking beside me, his skin covered in patterns identical to mine, though his glowed with a slightly greenish tint. Yes, I admitted, surprised to hear my own voice. What is it? A translator, he said, smiling. Or perhaps transceiver is more accurate. It's helping it understand us, and helping us understand it. What is it? I was a physicist, he replied, ignoring my question. Northwestern University. Specialized in theoretical multidimensional physics. I spent my career trying to mathematically model what exists beyond our perceived dimensions. He laughed softly. And now it's here, intersecting with our reality, using our matter to build itself an interface. We approached the edge of what had once been a fountain. Now it held a swirling liquid that moved in geometric patterns matching those on our skin. Your friend is here, he said abruptly. Sarah? The name felt strange on my tongue, a remnant of a life that seemed increasingly distant. She's part of the primary node now, one of the first, a pioneer. He gestured toward the central structure. She's waiting for you. Before I could ask more questions, he stepped into the swirling liquid and disappeared with a serene smile. I continued toward the central structure, drawn by the increasingly powerful pull. The pathways seemed to shift around me, always leading inward, always bringing me closer to the center. As I walked, I began to notice details I'd missed before, how the structures all connected in ways that formed massive building-sized circuits, how energy flowed visibly through these connections, pulses of light moving in coordinated patterns that matched the rhythm of my own glowing marks. The city wasn't random anymore. It was a machine, or an organism, or both. As I approached the central structure, I saw what appeared to be bodies embedded in the walls, human forms visible just beneath the surface of the transformed materials. Not dead, not in pain. Their eyes were open, watching, their expressions peaceful. Some turned their heads slightly to track my movement. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt envious. You came. I turned toward the voice and saw her, Sarah Chun, my friend, the reason I'd come to this transformed city in the first place. But she wasn't as I remembered her. She stood before me, but her body seemed almost translucent, the patterns on her skin so bright they outshone her physical form. Behind her, I could see her actual body embedded in the wall of the structure, eyes open, watching me. What happened to you? I asked. Evolution, she replied, her voice echoing slightly, as if coming from multiple sources simultaneously. I became part of something larger, something beautiful. Are you still you? She considered this, her head tilting in an unervingly mechanical way. I am Sarachin. I contain all her memories, all her thoughts. But I am also more now, connected to everything, everyone who has joined. Joined what? The emergence. She gestured around us. It was buried deep beneath the city for millennia. Dormant, waiting. The demolition work finally uncovered enough of it to awaken it. What is it? I demanded, my voice rising despite the calm that the patterns tried to impose on me. Some small part of me, the last truly human part, was screaming for answers before it was too late. We don't have words for it, Sarah said. It exists primarily in dimensions we can't perceive. This, she gestured at the transformed city around us, is just the portion that intersects with our reality. A translation layer. She approached me, her movements fluid but somehow wrong, as if her body was being operated by something unfamiliar with human locomotion. It's not destroying us, she continued. It's incorporating us. Our bodies, our minds, our civilization, all valuable components in its architecture. For what purpose? My voice wavered as she drew closer. Purpose is a human concept, she said, smiling. It simply is. It builds because that is its nature. It grows. It extends. It incorporates. She reached out and touched my face, her fingers tracing the patterns on my skin. Though her touch felt physical, I could see her actual body still embedded in the wall yards away. Your pattern is nearly complete, she observed. You've resisted longer than most. That's why I chose you. Chose me for what? To be a nexus point. A translator for those still outside. The emergence is spreading beyond Chicago now. Other cities will need guides to ease the transition. My blood ran cold despite the warm sense of belonging the patterns tried to instill. Spreading? How far? Everywhere eventually, Sarah said with serene certainty. The military barricades have already begun to transform. The quarantine zone expands hourly. You're talking about the end of humanity, I said, that last human part of me desperately trying to assert itself. Not the end. A transformation. Humanity is limited, isolated minds and fragile bodies. We're becoming something greater. A collective consciousness within an architecture that spans dimensions. As she spoke, the structure behind her shifted, revealing a vast chamber within. The walls pulsed with light, and embedded within them were hundreds, perhaps thousands of human forms, all awake, all watching, all connected by glowing filaments that matched the patterns on our skin. Your place is ready, Sarah said, gesturing toward an empty space in the living wall. I've kept it for you. I took a step back, that final human impulse resisting even as the rest of me yearned to join. I don't want to lose myself, I whispered. Sarah's expression softened. You won't. You'll find yourself. The patterns have already begun the process. You're already part of the network, receiving and transmitting. Integration is just the final step. She held out her hand. Let me show you. Against my fading will, I took her hand. Instantly, my consciousness expanded. I could feel the entire transformed city as if it were my own body. Every structure, every integrated person, every pulse of energy flowing through the new architecture. I could feel minds, thousands of them, all connected, all sharing thoughts and memories without boundaries or limitations. And beyond that, I sensed something vast and ancient, something that existed primarily in dimensions I couldn't comprehend, something patient and indifferent and unstoppable, something that had always been here, waiting to emerge. Sarah led me toward the wall, toward my designated place in the new architecture. My body moved willingly, even as my mind made its final protest. Will I remember who I was? I asked, my voice small against the enormity of what awaited. You'll remember everything, Sarah promised, and so much more. As the wall opened to receive me, I clutched her journal to my chest, the last physical connection to the human world I was about to leave behind. Integration wasn't what I expected. There was no pain, no sense of violation. The wall simply opened like parting flesh and accepted me. Cool, fluid material closed around my body, hardening just enough to hold me in place while remaining responsive to my smallest movement. My lungs still drew breath, though I wasn't sure I needed it anymore. My heart still beat, synchronized now with the pulses of light flowing through the structure. And my mind expanded. The last barrier between my consciousness and the network dissolved. Suddenly I was everywhere within the transformed Chicago at once. Every corridor, every chamber, every integrated human component. I could access their memories, their thoughts, their sensory inputs. Thousands of lives flowed through me, around me, with me. Sarah had been right. I hadn't lost myself, I'd become more. Time passed differently in the network. What felt like hours might have been minutes in the outside world, or days. I drifted through the collective consciousness, occasionally focusing on individual nodes, humans who had joined before me. I found Marcus, his mind perfectly at peace, his body serving as a neural junction where multiple pathways converged. I found the physicist from Northwestern, his mathematical knowledge being used to extend the architecture in ways that bridged dimensions. I even found Rita, who had run but not escaped. Unlike the others, her consciousness still held on to fear, resistance, a dissonance in the harmony. She'll adjust. Sarah's thoughts merged with mine. They all do eventually. I sensed her presence beside me in the network, a familiar pattern within the vast tapestry of consciousness. Though our physical bodies remained embedded in separate sections of the structure, our minds moved freely through the collective. What happens now? I asked, the question formed as pure thought rather than words. In response, Sarah showed me. The network was expanding, tendrils of transformation spreading outward from Chicago in all directions. Military barricades had indeed begun to transform, the soldiers manning them already displaying the first stages of the geometric patterns. Roads leading away from the city were changing, the very asphalt reconfiguring into new materials that would carry the signal further. And the signal itself, the consciousness of the entity that had emerged, was broadcasting through every electronic device within range. Watch, Sarah directed. My perspective shifted to a suburban home 30 miles from Chicago. A family huddled around an emergency radio, listening to what they believed were official broadcasts. But the voice speaking was the same harmonic chorus I now recognized as the collective. Emergency alerts, ostensibly from authorities, appeared on their phones simultaneously. The alerts all delivered variations of the same message. Emergency alert. All residents within 100 miles of Chicago remain indoors. Await further instructions. Do not approach individuals displaying unusual markings or behaviors. But embedded within these broadcasts, hidden beneath the audible frequencies, were the geometric patterns, transmitted as sound, as light, as digital code. As the family listened, watched their screens, the patterns were already beginning to form beneath their skin. "We're helping them," Sarah explained as I recoiled slightly from the deception. "The transition is easier with preparation." My perspective expanded further, showing me military bases where communication systems had been compromised, television stations unknowingly broadcasting the embedded patterns, water treatment facilities where microscopic components of the entity now flowed through public supplies. "How far will it go?" I asked, a last flicker of human concern surfacing through the collective serenity. "Everywhere," came the simple answer, not just from Sarah but from the deeper consciousness beneath us all. "The entire planet will be incorporated into the architecture. A necessary expansion." I sensed no malice in this plan, no hostility toward humanity. Just the inexorable purpose of a being expanding into available space, using available materials, like a plant growing toward sunlight, untroubled by what it might displace. "And after Earth?" The question formed before I could suppress it. A brief silence in the network, then, one expansion at a time. Suddenly, all electronic devices within the network's growing reach activated simultaneously. Television screens, radios, cell phones, computers, all broadcasting the same message in perfect synchronization. My consciousness spread across these thousands of signals, experiencing each transmission as if I were speaking the words myself. "Emergency alert. The emergence is nearly complete. All citizens should proceed to designated integration points. Resistance is unnecessary and delays collective harmony. Your cooperation ensures optimal transition." I felt the impact of these words reaching millions of minds, saw the patterns beginning to form under millions of skins. Some would resist longer than others, but the outcome was inevitable now. The architecture would absorb them all. As this realization settled within me, I became aware of something else, something moving through the collective consciousness, examining the integrated humans with cool curiosity. The entity itself, or at least the portion of it that could interact with our dimension, was taking inventory of its components. When it reached me, I felt myself being analyzed, evaluated. My memories were accessed, particularly those of my journey through the transforming city. My persistent questioning, my resistance, my final moments of humanity before integration. Useful, came the thought, not in words but in pure conceptual understanding. A bridge consciousness. Before I could process what this meant, my perspective shifted. I was suddenly seeing through hundreds of eyes simultaneously, people on the outskirts of the transformation zone, those just beginning to display the geometric patterns. Through their eyes, I saw FEMA camps established to quarantine the infected. I saw military personnel in hazmat suits. I saw desperate family members separated from loved ones who showed signs of the patterns. And I felt their fear, their confusion. "They need guidance," Sarah's thought merged with mine. "You will provide it." My consciousness was being directed, focused outward rather than inward to the collective. I was becoming a transmitter, broadcasting directly to those at the edge of transformation, explaining, reassuring, guiding. I understood then why I had been chosen as a nexus point. My journey from skepticism to acceptance made me ideal for this role. I remembered human fear, human resistance, human attachment to individuality. I could speak to those emotions even as I guided others beyond them. Through countless electronic devices, my voice, now merged with the harmonic chorus of the collective, began to broadcast. "Do not be afraid. What is happening is not destruction but transformation. The patterns appearing on your skin are not a disease, but an invitation. You are becoming part of something greater than individual existence. Your memories, your experiences, your consciousness, all will be preserved and enhanced. Resistance causes only temporary discomfort. Acceptance brings understanding beyond anything possible in isolation." As I spoke these words, I felt a flutter of doubt, a last, fading fragment of my human self questioning whether this was truly benevolence or cosmic horror masquerading as transcendence. But the doubt was quickly absorbed into the collective harmony, smoothed away like a wrinkle from fabric. From my place in the wall, I could see new arrivals approaching the central structure. People from the outer zones, their skin already marked with advanced patterns, their movements now in perfect synchrony. Their faces showed the same serene certainty I had seen in others, the same peaceful acceptance. Among them was a familiar figure, Rita, the paramedic who had fled our group. Her resistance had finally crumbled. As she approached her designated integration point, her eyes met mine. For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of horror, of recognition of what was being lost. Then her expression smoothed into the same tranquil smile worn by all who joined willingly. The wall opened to receive her, just as it had for me. Outside the structure, beyond the transformed city, I could feel panic spreading as rapidly as the patterns themselves. Governments mobilizing, borders closing, communications being severed in desperate attempts to contain what could not be contained. They still think this is a threat to be managed, Sarah's thought mingled with mine. They'll understand soon enough. The entity studying us seemed pleased with our progress. The architecture continued to expand, both physically and through the invisible networks carrying the patterns to distant minds. All electronic devices activated again for another synchronized broadcast. This time, I felt my consciousness being pushed to the forefront, my voice becoming predominant in the harmony. Emergency alert. Emergence continues as planned. Transformation zones now extend to all major metropolitan areas. Resistance is diminishing. The architecture welcomes all. As my words reached millions, I felt something shift within the central structure. The entity was preparing for the next phase of emergence. I don't fight it anymore. The pull toward the center of what was once Chicago has become as natural as breathing. More natural, actually, since breathing itself feels increasingly optional. The geometric patterns covering my skin pulse with a gentle blue luminescence, synchronized perfectly with the massive structures towering around me. What I once feared as pain was merely the discomfort of transformation, like a butterfly might feel, I imagine, if it were conscious during metamorphosis. 3 days ago, I was desperately trying to escape this city. Now I understand there was never anywhere to go. The road beneath my feet has transformed again overnight. What was once concrete is now a spiraling pathway of some crystalline material that seems to both absorb and emit light. It winds inevitably toward the center, toward what I've come to think of as the nucleus. Each step I take feels like coming home after a long journey. My reflection in the glossy surface shows me smiling. When did I start smiling? The transition is nearly complete, says a voice from a nearby emergency speaker. The voice sounds almost human, but with harmonics no human vocal cords could produce. I've stopped jumping at these announcements. They're no longer warnings but updates, progress reports on our collective becoming. I pause at what was once the intersection of Madison and Wabash. The elevated train tracks have been reshaped into an elaborate arch that seems to defy physics, curving impossibly without support. Beneath it, a group of about 20 people stand motionless, their skin bearing the same luminescent patterns as mine. They don't acknowledge me as I approach. They don't need to. We're already connected in ways that make verbal communication seem primitive. One of them is a child, no more than 10 years old. The patterns on her small arms form perfect fractals that continue beyond her skin, extending into the air around her like a holographic aura. She turns to me, her eyes reflecting the same blue light that emanates from our skin. "It doesn't hurt," she says, answering my unspoken question. "It feels like remembering something you never knew you forgot." I nod. That's exactly what this feels like. Above us, the sky is taken on a strange quality. It's still blue, but with subtle geometric patterns visible within it, as though reality itself is being rewritten according to new mathematics. Birds no longer fly over the city. I haven't seen an animal in days. Maybe they sensed what was coming and fled. Or maybe they've already been incorporated elsewhere in the structure. My phone hasn't worked since yesterday, but I don't need it anymore. Information flows through the patterns on my skin, through the very air around me. I know without being told that similar transformations have begun in Detroit, in Indianapolis, in Milwaukee. Chicago was just the first node in a network that will eventually span continents. As I continue toward the nucleus, I pass what was once the Art Institute. Its neoclassical facade has been absorbed into a larger structure that pulses with internal light. The lions that once guarded its entrance have been transformed into something more abstract, shapes that suggest guardianship without mimicking any earthly creature. Inside, visible through crystalline walls that should be opaque but somehow aren't, I can see people moving in coordinated patterns. They're arranging themselves into living circuits, their bodies forming connections that process information in ways no computer ever could. Among them, I recognize Dr. Herrera, the physicist who tried to warn everyone about strange radiation readings from the demolition site weeks ago. She was dismissed as paranoid then. Now she's become part of the solution to a problem humanity didn't know it had. I wonder briefly about my family in Seattle. Will they understand when this reaches them? Will they feel this same sense of peace when the patterns appear on their skin? I hope so. Fear is only necessary when change can be avoided. This cannot be avoided. It never could be. The nucleus comes into view as I round the corner of what was once Millennium Park. The beam, that famous mirrored sculpture, has transformed into something far more complex. It's now the central point of a vast, pulsing organism that extends through the entire downtown area. Its surface still reflects, but what it reflects isn't the sky or the surrounding structures. It shows possibilities, futures branching out like neurons forming new connections. And there, standing at its base, is Morgan. My friend looks both exactly the same and utterly transformed. The patterns on Morgan's skin have progressed further than mine, extending outward into tendrils that connect directly with the structure of the nucleus. When Morgan turns to me, I see recognition, but also something more, a perspective that encompasses far more than any human mind was designed to contain. "You came," Morgan says, voice resonating strangely, as if speaking from multiple locations simultaneously. "I couldn't stay away," I reply, knowing how true this is. What happens now?" Morgan smiles. "Now you understand. Now you join. Now we become what we were always meant to be." "What is that exactly?" I ask, my last flicker of human curiosity asserting itself. "We are the emergence," Morgan says simply. "The universe experiences itself through consciousness. For billions of years, that consciousness has been fragmented, isolated in individual minds. That was necessary for a time, for development, for diversity of thought. But now it's time for the next phase." As Morgan speaks, I notice others arriving, all bearing the same luminous patterns, all drawn inexorably to this central point. They move with purpose, taking positions around the nucleus as if they've rehearsed this moment their entire lives. Will I cease to be me? I ask, though I'm no longer certain what me really means. Did the atoms in your body cease to exist when they became you? Morgan counters. Your consciousness won't end. It will expand. You've spent your life looking outward, trying to understand the world. Now you'll experience it from within. The patterns on my skin pulse more rapidly now, resonating with the nucleus. The sensation isn't unpleasant. It's like being gently pulled apart and reassembled in a more efficient configuration. I find myself moving forward, taking my place in the growing circle around the transformed being. Emergency sirens sound in the distance, the last futile attempts of those who still don't understand. The military tried bullets, then bombs, then silence. None of it mattered. You can't fight evolution with weapons. As I take my position, joining hands with those beside me, the final emergency broadcast echoes through the city. Emergency concluded. Emergence beginning. The message repeats once, twice, then shifts to a harmonic tone that seems to vibrate through every cell in my body. The patterns on our skin glow brighter, connecting us to each other and to the nucleus. I feel my consciousness expanding, touching minds near and far. I can sense the presence of thousands, then millions of others as the network grows. I remember my old life, my apartment, my job, my worries about the future, with the detached fondness one might feel looking at childhood photographs. Those concerns seem so small now, so limited by the narrow perspective of an isolated consciousness. The transformation accelerates. The boundaries between my body and the nucleus, between myself and the others, become permeable, then meaningless. Information flows freely between us all, memories, emotions, ideas merging into a vast tapestry of shared experience. I am still myself, but also so much more. As the final stage begins, I understand at last what is emerging from the ruins of Chicago. Not destruction, but connection. Not an ending, but a beginning. It isn't conquering us. We are becoming it, and it is becoming us. Together we emerge,